Um, Good afternoon. I'm Dave Perkins, and this is our final installment of our Flannery O'Connor series, and we've had a great time doing this. It's been very productive. Were you all at the show last night? Well, I think you'll agree that these people did something special last night. It was one of the most beautiful nights of music in a long time here in Nashville, and I think will be talked about. This is all being organized and presented by the Religion in the Arts and Contemporary Culture program, and my colleague Robin Jensen sits over here in the purple jacket. And I'd also like to introduce Craig Amison. Where are you, Craig? Craig, stand up for a second. Craig is CEO director of the Flannery O'Connor Andalusia Foundation that takes care of Flannery's farm and estate in Milledgeville, Georgia. And our performances last night were to the benefit of that foundation toward keeping the property viable as a place of pilgrimage for, as I said last night, all kinds of people go to the farm. It's a beautiful place, and if you're a Flannery fan, if you've read the stories will come alive if you visit the farm. And I encourage you to make a jaunt down to Middle Georgia and do that. Our panelists today are Karin Berquist on the far end, Mr. Linford Detweiler, Karin and Linford from over the Rhine, Ms. Mary Gauthier, Julie Lee, Minton Sparks, and our moderator today is Julie Height. And I'm going to turn it over to Julie.
Thank you to all of you for coming today. I'm going to start off the conversation with you, Minton, because you happen to be sitting next to me. And I found a quote from Marshall Chapman that she has called you the illegitimate child of. Oh, great! She has. That's magic. I'll say some more names, see if more people show up. She called you the illegitimate child of Flannery O'Connor and Hank Williams, and that kind of, huh? Oh, the ghost of Hank Williams. Thank you for clarifying. Thank you for clarifying. But that kind of gets at the hybrid literary musical nature of what you do, and given the nature of the spoken word medium, you're not necessarily bound to typical song structure, but I'm wondering what you see as the relationship between the pieces that you write and literature as in the written word, or if you see your pieces as being short stories in a sense, more akin to short stories or to songs.
Okay. This is close. Hello. So the question is, the structure of it, is it more like a song or more like a story? Okay.
Right.
Well, I consider myself a poet. That's where I started, and my work started trying to be published in literary journals, and for years and years and years, and was published some. I was lucky to be in Lonzy's Fried Chicken, and that was one of the big ones I think that took my work. And there weren't a whole lot of outlets, and some other places took as well. I'm forever indebted to Lonzy's Fried Chicken, but
what kind of fried chicken?
Lonzy's.
I'm ignorant. I don't know what that is.
Neither do I. They put out a journal out of North Carolina. They do sort of southern literature and southern poetry.
Oh, I'm unfamiliar with it. Thank you.
Yeah,
I'll look for
you
that.
could submit. I mean, no, they'd probably be coming after you. But anyway, and so just being in Nashville, I ended up having the opportunity to work with a lot of musicians. And so that formed the way I was writing. I was writing sort of blank verse, and my first record is a lot more blank verse. And then when I was writing with musicians, I saw that there was, obviously in poetry there's such a musicality to the,
Right.
that's what you hook into anyway. But and then putting it to music. So I see it as sort of I'm just splitting genres in a way. I sometimes call myself a speaker songwriter.
But have you found yourself moving more in the direction of songwriting structure in the way that you write, in creating a refrain, a recurring refrain in some of your pieces, or the way that you use rhyme?
Not intentionally. I think, I don't think I'm not aware of songwriting structure so much. I am from listening to it, but it's definitely, in the next record I'm doing has a lot more refrain in it, so that may be what I'm doing.
Well,
So, yes, that is what I'm doing.
you did a piece last night, Sin Sick Soul, and that's one example of the way that you can take very dark themes like adultery and violence and twist them in such a way that it allows people to laugh, or it makes people laugh, and that is something that Flannery O'Connor also did. Wove humor and very dark themes together, and I'm wondering how you balance those things successfully in your writing, and whether that was something that you were able to instinctively do from the beginning.
Yeah, I think I'm always surprised that they're funny. That's always surprising to me. And I've had people come up afterwards and go, I can't believe they were laughing. Because it's not intentionally funny, but I think it is the people I come from when all of the tragedy that probably most people come from, when you start telling the story, there's usually, if you tell it over and over again, there becomes sort of this mythic part of the story, and then humor can kind of seep into that. And so, and I sort of started out wanting to be a stand-up comedian, so I think those kind of came together.
Yeah.
Oh.
Does it ever surprise you the parts at which people will laugh when you perform?
Yeah, because it's usually when somebody's been maimed, or like you were saying, third time adultery seems to be funnier than second time. So I don't know the formula, but yeah, it is funny. It's wild what's funny.
Yeah, and it occurs to me too that in reading Flannery's letters, she admitted that she laughed out loud every time she would go back and she would just reread her stories over and over again and get embarrassed because she laughed at them, and she had a hard time not laughing if she was presenting them publicly. But I think you're probably able to keep a straighter face, and add to the joke that way when you present yours.
Yeah, and I don't think it's ever a joke. I think it's more, it's that thing, the funniest, I think you read the autobiographies of comedians, that they've had the most pain in their life. And I don't know, what is that? What is funny about pain? I'm not sure.
I think it's a common denominator. Like it's the common denominator that, like, that's the perfect
It's
rub.
the laugh of recognition, probably.
Yes, more so than the laugh of,
Yeah.
oh, that's hilarious. It's more the,
Yeah.
I know people like that. I have people like that. I am people like that.
I think that's it too. It's the laugh of recognition
It could
more than wow.
Could it have something to do with the fact that too, joy and suffering come from both come from the same part of our brain, so there's already a connection that's there within us.
Yeah. Well, Karin and Linford, I want to direct the next set of questions down to you. Get down to the other end of the table. Flannery O'Connor wrote that the writer whose themes are religious particularly needs a region where these themes find a response in the life of the people, and this condition is met in the South as nowhere else. And you have a song called Jesus in New Orleans that's set in this bar scene in New Orleans, and I'm wondering, why did you choose that setting for that song?
Well, it would have made perfect sense to do that song last night, but we didn't think of it, so sorry.
It's all right. It's all right.
But yeah, actually, it's based on a true story. It really was a very personal song, and it took place in a little hole in a wall bar down in New Orleans during a pretty, tough period in my life. And Linford and I wrote it together, but the characters are true, they're real, and it's just a very confessional piece, actually.
I love that song.
Thank
I
you.
just adore that. Would you say the first line or two of that song? I think people, if they don't know it, it's just killer.
Okay.
Or you could sing it a cappella if you
Oh,
want.
jeez. I'll just speak. The last time I saw Jesus, I was drinking Bloody Marys in the South, in a bar room in New Orleans, rinsing out a bad taste in my mouth. Yeah.
And then it gets
So
better.
it's important to remember that the song didn't start with any sort of literary thoughts about the South.
No.
It started with a really good Bloody Mary with spicy beans in it next to a jukebox with really good music.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the literary stuff comes later, I guess.
Right, right. But was there something about that experience, the spiritual sensibility and that context, that setting, the presence of a good Bloody Mary that kind of leapt out at you and suggested itself as a
Yeah,
good
we were,
song topic?
we've thought a lot about geography and writing, and that's one big reason we haven't left Ohio, because it's one place where we probably do have some roots. And when you think about a lot of American artists, Robert Frost or Georgia O'Keeffe or Flannery O'Connor, you think of a specific place, a specific piece of earth and ground.
Right.
And so we are interested in that, and we were very sort of drunk on all things New Orleans, and wanting to just absorb and soak in whatever we could find down there. So I think that, the specific piece of dirt is important, but we're just, at the end of the day, pasty white Northerners, really.
Join the club.
But that was something else I was going to ask about, the role that you believe region plays in not being pasty white Northerners so much, but the role that you believe region does play in your songwriting, because you released an album titled Ohio and a song Ohio that you did perform last night. So even if you're not drawing on Southern imagery and that sort of regionality all the time, you are still drawing on Ohio.
Yeah, and I think I learned it from Woody Allen. Just, write what you know. So, and I spent most of my formative years in Ohio, and even though I didn't like it, I rebelled against it, and I saw a lot of things that I didn't want to see growing up. I think that's kind of what makes you a writer, a good one, but it makes you a writer. And yeah, I think embracing that was half the journey for me.
I am jealous of people that grew up in the South, from a
Why?
writing standpoint.
You got that red clay soil and that something about.
I don't know. There's a cadence, and sort of, as to storytelling, and also I think as people sort of accumulate their wealth and quantify their wealth, I think there's something about the Southern accumulation of wealth that has a lot to do with stories and jokes and family history, and so yeah, it's something that I'm very, very interested in, and I try to just let it influence me,
So you think that there is a sense in which you have to be from the South or spend time in the South to be able to do that effectively or convincingly?
No, I don't. I mean, Woody Allen wasn't from the South. But anyway, I'm just, I think it's just about being a good storyteller, being aware, taking notes, capturing that. You always have to have, we use this term, it's like a butterfly catcher in our workshops that we do, and it sounds trite, but it's just, if you're awake You know, things are constantly snapping and pulsing around you. And if you can catch that, you know, and you're just present in the moment, you know, and then you write it down, you start to work with it and play with it. The gift of storytelling, though, I think has just been so nurtured in the South that I don't know, maybe I don't know, maybe that's part of the whole gift of it, but I don't think you have to be from the South.
Anyone else like to jump in with that question, the idea of whether you have to be from the South or to spend time in the South to be able to write convincingly about it?
Well, I think you have to spend time anywhere that you're going to write about. I mean, I think of, you know, Tim O'Brien could write really convincingly of places where he wasn't necessarily from, but he'd spent considerable time there. I think for myself, you know, it'd be really difficult for me to write about Canada. But somewhere I've been, I don't have to necessarily be from there. I always think storytellers, especially in my family, just had to have a telephone, because every time you picked it up, I mean, you know, yesterday my aunt called me and said, well, I guess you heard about her getting pinned against the wall in the car camper. You know, and then just, here we go. I mean, and it wasn't, you know, it was no formal stuff. It was just pick up the phone, or the one I love is, I guess you heard your Aunt Trella left him and she's 91. I have this, you know, so it just, yeah. So it wasn't, I don't know, that's probably going on in Boston too, is my guess, but it's got a different flavor.
I think people in the North go to therapy for that, though.
We
Whereas
just
people
call
in the
each other.
South, yeah, you guys work it out and make beautiful art out of it, and the Northerners are like, help, you know, calling their shrink, so maybe.
Well, I'll put this out there for everyone. In this era in which people transcend region more freely, more regularly in the course of their lives than perhaps ever before, and you know, whether their medium is music or literature, there is often a transcending of region. What do you think the relationship is between region and between theme and between style you might be working with, between the cadence of your writing or the feel itself?
Well, I'm from Maryland,
Right.
and Dave and I aren't far from each other where our families are from. And I agree with what they both said. I don't think you have to be from the South, but I moved here 13 years ago, and there is something that Minton has, and that another friend of mine who's here has, that is just like music. It's this musical cadence. I know what Linford's talking about. But being a transplant, somebody that actually transplanted, when I got here was around that was when my own stories, being separated from my stories enough that I could write about it. And maybe, probably, definitely too much in a nostalgic way. And now I'm trying to find my way to honesty about that, and not be afraid to, you know, just, I mean, write songs about cornbread, that's easy. Write songs about, you know, lullabies, but it's harder to write songs about the fact that your parents fight with each other. Those are the harder issues that I'm trying to get at now. And I think, I love my mom and dad. They don't fight all the time. But anyway. I have to stay, there you go. That's just, had to say that. But I think the connection for me that happened here was when I was suddenly surrounded by living in a multiracial neighborhood next to an 82-year-old black man who would come and share his songs and his story. And then it's like, it starts just welling up from the ground. And you meet people from Georgia, and you meet people from everywhere. But there's this thing that's here that definitely started influencing things. And I started trying to be all blue-grayish. And then I had to finally, I don't know, you start trying on different hats. Like, it's like going to a vintage clothes shop and going, does this fit? You know, and then you try on another. Like, that's at least how I see it. And then finally you find something, you go, okay, I could pull this off. Or this, maybe this is me. Or trying to just find your way at what's yours. Anyway. Is that, yeah.
Anyone else want to
add to that thought?
Mary, you've been quiet over there. I'm going to throw something in your direction. Now, you opened your set last night with your song Snake Bit, which is a song that you have said is Flannery inspired. And in both sound and in the story that you tell in that song, it is a very dark and striking song. And I'm wondering if you can talk about what ways in which that song is inspired by Flannery O'Connor's writing. And maybe tell people a little bit about what that song is about, if they are not familiar with it.
Well, one of the gifts that Flannery gave to me as a woman writer is permission to go dark, to take it to that place that scares the hell out of people. It's hard to do without apologizing for it. As a woman in the South, men can do it, but it's harder as a woman. And she did it in the most profoundly powerful way, and she gave me permission to do it, and to not have to apologize for it either. Snake bit is something that my daddy used to say whenever things went wrong. He'd say, "God damn it, I'm snake bit." Over little things like you missed the red light, you missed the green light, or you're going towards the train tracks and trains coming, or bigger things, you know, like money problems or problems with my mother. And so I like the idea of snake bit, and I wanted to work it into something, but I had to live a long time to get to what it meant for me. And so the idea of the song is that the prisons are full of people who came to a fork in the road and went the wrong way. And so I tried to capture that moment of that splitting, that person at that fork going the wrong way, and how and why that happened. And is that written in the cards for us sometimes? Is there a destiny that some people are just going to end up in prison? Can you see it when they're a kid, that they're headed for it, and it's just a careening, out of control destiny? Or is there a moment where we have a choice and it could go either way? Sometimes I think both is true. I don't know the exact answer to that, but I think that in that song the character made the wrong choice, and everything's going to hell, and the character's realizing that everything worth holding has slipped through her fingers, and now she's holding on to a gun. And it's the kind of song that will clear a room. You know, if you're there to have fun and drink and, you know, hang out with your pals, maybe laugh and sing along, I'm just sure I'm not the artist for you. But neither was Flannery O'Connor. That's how she inspired me.
Yeah, I see parallels in that song, the kind of just limitless potential for human evil that you're getting at in the sense of this character being cursed and being presented with an opportunity to choose to go one way or another, but like characters in Flannery O'Connor's stories often did, choosing something that was the more destructive of the choices.
The question becomes, is it a choice when your daddy told you since you were a kid you're going to be snake bit just like me? Is it a choice, or was it programmed into you somehow?
Yeah.
That's the question, and I don't have the answer.
Is there a sense in which that song too, in the way that it sounds and feels, the melody, how desolate it feels and ominous, the chord progression and the sparseness of the song is sonically influenced by Flannery's writing?
Not in a linear way, but I think I'm going for that spook, that same spook. It's heavy with swamp air and poisonous snakes.
Yeah, it's definitely there in in the music. It can be felt. I mean, it has a certain quality about it. It's not just the lyric. If you were to look at it on a page, you have to experience it. You feel it.
Mm.
And Julie, you did a couple of songs last night that were Flannery O'Connor inspired. One was "A Good Man Is Hard to Find," and "In the River," inspired by Flannery stories of the same title. And you mentioned at the time that where you took those stories in your songs, it's the destination was a little bit less dark than the original story version. And I'm wondering how that process works for you if you're using a story as a jumping off point. What elements, what inspired you, first off, for a song like The River, inspired by the story of the same title, and what elements you were drawing from that story and how you harmonized your own ideas, your own voice with those?
Okay, The River is probably the better one to talk about. There was two different approaches there. The River, I read the story first, and then started writing a chorus based on this little boy's story of going down to this river and trying to find the kingdom of heaven underneath the water. And so I had before I left, I had the melody line on the guitar. I had that feeling, that slow-moving feeling of him walking down to the river. And I had the chorus, down to the river and I let it go. I laid down my burdens, looking for a home. Down to the river, oh my soul. And I sang glory. And I was picturing that story in my mind, or how I pictured it, like this revival and the hymns of the people singing that he had heard the day before still echoing in his mind. But it would be another year until I went through my own dark patch in Belfast, because I started that before I left for Northern Ireland for a year. Left, went to Northern Ireland, experienced depression for the first time in a long time. And yeah, that was a really dark time for me, and it scared the crap out of me. And I was like, am I gonna stay like this forever? And all these fears started to come to the surface. And a friend said to me, she goes, you know, as long as I've known you, I've always seen guilt, regret, and shame. She didn't even get the M on the end of shame, and I was like, you know, just a mess. And some people have that gift to just be able to name something that they see in you, and you're just undone. You're like, can you really see that clearly? Because I didn't. And then I just thought, well, what would I take down to the river and let go? So it was my story and her story. But it was definitely more of an educated jumping off point, right? And that story still haunts me, her story. Now, that story was in a book that had the cover, A Good Man Is Hard to Find, on it. Hadn't read the story yet. Stupid. So I was in Belfast, and I didn't have the book with me. I was back at home. And so all I did, that line was in my mind. What a great title for a song, you know, without knowing her story, right? So I wrote it about who I knew. That was definitely just a jumping off point to write about somebody that I did think was one of the best examples of a godly man who wouldn't even call himself good. And that would be my now 92-year-old neighbor, Mr. Sherrill. So I wrote about what I knew, but just used that one little line to jump off of. And I'm guilty of stealing like that all the time. Sometimes, and then I went back and read the story and was like, holy crap, that's dark.
But isn't it good that you did that without, I mean, would you have written it if you'd have read it?
Probably no.
Because maybe you would have been intimidated.
I would have been scared.
So maybe that's not all bad.
It's like going, my friend Sarah Dark, her last name's Dark, Sarah Mason Dark. She calls it the dark side. I go over to her house and I'm like, I'm coming over to the dark side. So when I go over there, she talks, sometimes we used to write together, and she used to talk about, now she talks about writing like, it's like going down a rabbit hole.
Here it is.
And you wonder if you're gonna come out, you know, the same. And you probably won't, but what you come out with is what she comes out with is brilliant and true and real. And I need to have permission to be dark and not wrap it all up nice and pretty.
Shall I?
Yeah.
I'll give you permission to.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, gosh, okay. Yeah, really, we can all and then Julie went down the rabbit hole.
I think your song that you based on, if I could just interject on that Christina Rossetti poem, is not wrapped up pretty. You went down in that one, and I love that song.
Well, that's where other writers, I've just recently recorded some of other people's poetry put to music, and that is great for me because Emily Dickinson doesn't wrap it all up nice and neat. And it helps me to start out with somebody else's story, and then bring my own thing to it. And I love doing that. It's totally like cheating, but I love it. And that's where, like, Christina Rossetti's words were like, she just leaves you with the question. She doesn't answer the question.
The thing that I'd like to say is that you don't go to the dark place gratuitously. It's purposeful. You do it because without darkness, there is no light.
Yeah.
And that is what Flannery taught me. And it all is wrapped around the concept of grace. That without sorrow and suffering, we have no use for grace. So it's a purposeful journey into the sorrow and the struggle and the frailty of human nature. It's not just a Edward Scissorhands thing. It's how you. It's, I think, maybe one of the only true ways to talk about grace. That has a deep resonance. If not, you're talking about, a flesh-colored Christ that glow in the dark. That Dylan line, the Jesus for sale. So that's what I learned from the example of Flannery's work. That's deeply spiritual behind the struggle. Yeah.
I have a confession to make. Someone asked me earlier if I was a fan of Flannery O'Connor's writing, and I don't know that I would use that word. I think there's very little, if any, sort of literary cuddling that has gone on with her writing and me, you know.
Cuddling, good word.
And it's a place where I went and I read just about everything she wrote, except for probably some of the letters, and just sort of absorbed it, and was profoundly disturbed by it. It's a place I go to be disturbed, you know. And I'm not ever completely comfortable with what's going on, and I don't fully understand what's going on. When I try to do what Flannery does, you know, there is this sort of persistent question: did she take perverse pleasure in really horrible things happening to her characters, you know? And I just sort of participate honestly and openly in my own darkness and the darkness that I saw growing up. It's this tension that I haven't fully resolved. After last night, I'm really hungry to sort of go back and begin revisiting her work again. But it's sort of messy business, you know. It's not a place I go to find a lot of comfort, you know. And I think that's her sort of her great gift is like what you were saying about grace and sort of the reality of it. It's not necessarily a thing that's real comfortable.
That reminds me of a famous Woody Guthrie saying. He says the artist's job is to disturb the comfortable, comfort the disturbed.
To disturb, say that again?
The artist's job is to disturb the comfortable and comfort the disturbed.
I like comforting the disturbed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Mary, what you were describing, the quality in Flannery O'Connor's writing, I think of it as purposeful jarring, you know, jarring with purpose, with some idea of how it's going to impact the reader. And I wonder if, you know, the way that you, what you take from her writing and the way that you talk about what you do, I wonder if you see a similarity in kind of your sense of vocation as a songwriter at a very deep level in what you're trying to do and what Flannery was trying to do with her writing.
Well, I brought this quote of Flannery's that I just love. I'm going to read it and answer the question
Go for it.
in her voice. When you can assume that your audience holds the same beliefs as you do, you can relax a little and use more normal means of talking to it. When you have to assume that it does not, then you have to make your vision apparent by shock. To the hard of hearing, you shout. For the almost blind, you draw large and startling figures.
I loved that. I loved that quote, and that is an idea I have argued with internally ever since I read it, because I read an essay that rebutted that. That was called "Whispering Hope," and it talked about. I wanted to make those bold, vivid, violent gestures to get people's attention, and I never could do it convincingly. And then I read this idea that a whisper can also be extremely powerful. You don't necessarily have to shout, and that felt a little bit more at home to me, that maybe I could just whisper something into somebody's ear and it would have the same effect, you know. So I love that quote from Mystery and Manners, and but I argue with it. So.
I think it's just a perfect example of finding your own voice. That's Flannery's voice, and that's your voice, you know, and knowing your skill, knowing where you're from, and what you can use, you know. That's a perfect example of that, I think.
And knowing that it could all change tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's right.
I might start whispering and you're doing startling stuff on the table.
Yeah.
That's the journey of the artist, is we
Yeah.
don't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah,
Even when we're in the process of writing, we don't know where the story's going. It tells us, we don't tell it.
that's very true.
And in order to continue to be of service to the art, we have to get ourselves out of it and let it guide us. And suddenly we change in our journey and go about things differently. We don't even know how it happened. You know, it's almost like the voice exists there, and we're just trying to find it and trying to be the vehicle through which it pours. You know, like the metaphor I like is that at best we're lightning rods. We're not the lightning.
Minton, you alluded to some evolution in the way that, in the structure of your pieces that will be evident when you release your new recording, but have you also seen shifts in the kind of themes that you end up writing about, or the tone, or how much humor is present as you go along? Or I mean, I know you also say it's kind of like a process of gathering whatever your family sends to you, but you're certainly not just transmitting that verbatim. You know, there is an art to what you do with those stories.
The shift, I don't know. You know, I was thinking it's weird to be here because the sort of foundation for my work is redemption, which is wild. I don't necessarily think it's apparent. But pretty much every piece there is some sort of, I ask myself, what is this character yearning for? And ask myself, what am I yearning for? And this yearning and redemption is sort of underneath all of it. And that, I think that's becoming more apparent in my newer pieces, that was doing more straight narratives, and there's a little bit more, using metaphor a little bit more than I was. So I think that's shifting. But I think about it, and underneath all of it, sort of my history is in reading, and from Flannery O'Connor to just other writers, is sort of a feminist spirituality, which is such a wild thing to be doing in rural,
In the context of the
southern
South.
rural poetry.
Yeah.
You know, so that's and every time I'm telling somebody that, they're like, really, huh? But that's my intention, and so I think that the intention, it's becoming clearer to me, and I think it's becoming clearer in the pieces I'm writing. So I think that, yeah, it's like to be wildly feminist using the vehicle of Southern rural poetry.
Yeah.
It's an interesting.
Can you give us one example of how you do that, or explain in the context of one of your pieces that intent behind it?
Well, I'm trying to a newer piece that we just recorded the other day is about two women who were prostitutes that ended up falling in love, and the whole story is about. This is that piece. And the whole story is about a culture that sees that as sinful, and then really looking at the power of the love of that and saying that the love is much more overpowering, and this is sort of almost something to hold up and shoot for. Does that make sense? So you'd have to know the piece, but it's about lesbian prostitutes falling in love, and just that they sort of become the zenith figure in the poem, and sort of through a rural Southern voice. So, we'll see how that works.
It works. I think it's an example of this, what we just read. It's startling figures that point to something that we couldn't see any other way. And it's a powerful piece, and we got to finish writing that song. Yeah.
Hope so.
But as you alluded, Mary, there are some things that are more shocking because of even the regional context that you might be writing and performing them in. There are some things that might just strike the ear differently, if you're doing that here as opposed to somewhere else. Or has that been your experience? I'll put this out there for anyone doing. Do you get different reactions to your pieces if you're performing them in a Southern context as opposed to elsewhere in the United States or beyond?
One thing I think I just thought of that when you were, it's amazing to set pieces in the basement of a church and have the accent I have and have certain expectations. People are like, you're one of us. Oh my God. It's sort of this march along so far, and then we've wrecked the car. So, and I guess I play off of that a little bit, but. I think it makes a big difference. It is interesting. We were talking about where this plays. I mean, Ireland was a great place for me because it's such a story culture and, family stories. But some places are more receptive than others, I'd say. And the South actually is, smaller communities for my work is not as receptive, or usually not as receptive than more. It really depends. It's interesting to see who's open to it.
If you're performing in a small community, what type of venue do you usually perform? Does that have anything to do with it?
VFW
halls?
Well, we have done that, and we found that was not a good place. So hopefully like a little performing arts enclave. We did the Tyson Chicken little get-together, and it wasn't good. So I have a real varied response to my work.
Family picnic.
Dave, how are we doing on time over there?
We're fine, about another 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay. I want to put this question out there for everyone. I asked Julie specifically about drawing inspiration from literature for pieces that you write, but I'd like to put that out there generally for everyone. How does that work when you are in some way inspired by a piece of literature and writing based on that? What can that look like? I know it certainly doesn't necessarily take the form of translating that piece into musical form or into spoken word form, but what can and does that look like?
You mean me?
No,
Okay,
for
everybody.
anyone,
Yeah.
anyone, everyone.
Well, I'm stuck on I was talking to Minton about a poet last night that we both found out we really liked, B.H. Fairchild, and we both happened to love this one poem, and we had one of those like scream moments. It was great. But I've been a huge fan of B.H. Fairchild, and this poem needs to be a Sean Penn film. It's incredible, and I want desperately to write a song. I don't know why I've got it in my mind that I need to write the song based on this poem, but I usually don't spend that much time on a song, and I'm out of my element here, I think, but I'm really going to hunt it down because it's something I'm not used to doing, and it's going to take me years unless somebody does it first. I'll have to shoot them, but no, it's really intimidating because I hold this poem in such high esteem, and it's so brilliant, and it's such a complete work in itself. So as an inspirational jumping off point, you know, I don't know where it's going, but I've been chewing on it now for probably 3 years. So I don't know, maybe Minton, you might have some ideas.
Are there examples of over the Rhine songs that you could point to that you've written that have been inspired by particular writers, particular works, in one way or another?
I'm sure there are. For me, it's as a songwriter, on some level, I care about fresh language. If it's been said 100 times already, I'm not that interested in it. I think trying to write a song that works, that feels like something newly discovered, yet maybe has always been there, that sort of feeling is a really good exercise in trying to live a life that works, and so writers, how can we not go there to the sort of marketplace of ideas and language and just join in the conversation, I think we have to find our way there. So for me, I don't know that I could. I mean, obviously I listen to records, but really writers do something equally as important. They give me rough elbows and sort of give me ideas and give me somebody to argue with, and really laugh with and sort of commune with. And this Kafka quote: "A book should be the axe that shatters the frozen sea within." I think Flannery does that in spades. She picks up her axe and stuff shatters and blood splatters, and I don't have a choice. I have to go there. In order to have the sort of in order to sort of make sense of the life that I want to live. So I don't really think about a specific part of a song. It's more about an ongoing conversation.
Julie, you mentioned your most recent recording project that has several pieces that are Emily Dickinson inspired on it. And for those pieces, were you taking poems and literally framing them in, writing a melody to frame them and arranging them, or how did you work with those poems?
Yeah, I'm pretty blatant. I mean, I'm not that complex. What you see is what you get. No, I think like when there's it was just those words. Will there really be a morning? Is there such a thing as day? Could I see it from the mountains if I were as tall as they? At that point, I was going back and forth to North Carolina a lot, going to the mountains and being drawn there, and then back, and then drawn there again and back. And I just, has it feet like water lilies? I just love the way, like, I don't think of myself like a poet. I don't. Like, that's not a jumping off point for me. But I think I love it when somebody comes up with, like, he just said rough elbowed. And I'm like, I would never say that. Do you know what I mean? Like those creative ways of expressing something that Linford is brilliant at, and that I think we all pull from different people's language. So I loved the way she visually, because for me it's about painting. Those were very much visual things for me, those two poems. The other one was Hope's the Thing with Feathers, which everybody loves, you know, that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And I found this old tenor banjo in those same mountains, and it just started coming out, you know, to that kind of Appalachian, however you say it, melody. And it's like I see it like a painting. That's how poetry, like, and it's hard for me to connect with it when it's very abstract and all over the place. I just need to know, I need to read more.
But you were drawing inspiration in terms of the tone that the melody should have, and the kind of emotional quality that a song could have based on reading the text of a poem. That's where you were taking it.
Yeah, and it's like I didn't look and see if anybody else had done it before I did that. Again, probably not so smart. I probably would have stopped, because I realized a lot of people have put Will There Really Be a Morning to somebody else, like choirs sing it, and like, but I heard it completely different, and I liken it to like, Karin would hear it one way, Mary would sing it another way, I'd paint it like this, Minton would emote it, and like, she'd buck dance it, right? And like, it's like everybody, it's like that feeling of, because for me, I started out as a painter, so going to art school, and I started painting when I was 8, so I see it like, here we are with our easels, all around the same model. And it's ridiculous when you get to the end of the day and you just take your coffee and you walk around, and you're like, shut up. It's just so cool. You're like, I never would have, and this person totally focused on this thing, or totally simplified, and this person did every little tiny detail, you know, and you're just like, okay. Obviously, we're all trying to get at the same thing from a different perspective. So when I heard those words, I saw a landscape. I saw visually something in my mind. And I think that's where I jump off from sometimes. That allows me to just think melody, think harmony, think painting, and not think, oh, I have to be brilliant and say something nobody's ever said before. Emily said it, I'm just gonna repeat it. That bears repeating. So there it is. I'm not going to add anything to that. I'm not going to take anything away. So it's just, that's how I kind of see it.
But you're a visual artist too, right?
Yeah.
And so you add textures and tactile things that nobody else could add, you know, in the way that you do your things. So yeah, good stuff.
And when you were talking, I was thinking of, and when you were speaking your admiration for Linford's analogy,
Yeah.
I think that you know, represented at this table, we have a lot of different approaches to the use of language here, and the kind of imagery. You're all drawn to different types of imagery. And I think that you tend to write more with very tangible, physical kind of images. And Karin and Linford, would you say you tend to use more metaphor, not or more of a mixture of not always just tangible, but also more abstract and poetic?
I'm really bad at analyzing what I do.
It's all right.
We'll leave that to you.
Someone said that she was writing a novel, and she thinks it's about the fact that we all see the way things are, and we know they're not the way they should be, and we want to do something about it, and we realize that we can't really do much, if anything, and then we have this ache, you know, and or longing, and we have to figure out what to do with that longing. And she said, I think a lot of your work's like that, or about that place. And I thought, wow, I'll take that.
Yeah.
You know, I think a lot of my writing grew out of just family stuff. It wouldn't be that different from a lot of the stories that Minton was telling last night in such a fabulous, wonderful, humorous way and rich way. But I don't know what to do with that longing, and music is something that helps me have a place to just keep it organized. So, I don't know.
Julie,
Yeah.
maybe one final question for everybody.
All right. I was going to ask you specifically, Minton, actually. We've been talking about the ways in which we bring stories to life through music, but one of the things that we haven't talked about is the way that you are not primarily singing a melody, but you use your body a great deal in conveying a story. And last night, one of the great examples was the one with the three women that you're comparing them to hens, and you do the whole chicken thing. But how does that come about in the? How do you see the relationship between being bodily involved in telling a story, writing it, and then being bodily involved in it?
Well, I started out, I'm a drummer, and so so I'm really rhythmical, and so I think that's it. I think I'm just holding beats with my body, so however that's happening. And so I think, so poetry's really rhythmical, and then the performance. So I think that's it. I think that's sort of what the question is. But the thing that's not here, I always play with a musician, and so that's sort of about half of what I do is the person that I play with. And so I usually John Jackson played with me last night, and he and I, when we write something together, I really tell him, or after my piece is written, I tell him sort of what the music is I'm thinking about, and then he goes and works with that, and then we kind of collaborate. And so I don't know if that's the answer to the question, but there's a lot of, it definitely is music to me. I mean, it sits in I usually try to sit in a pocket of some sort of groove in the performance. So
I hear melody when you speak.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I completely hear melody
Yeah,
when you
totally.
speak. And I think you also sing with your body.
Yeah.
Like, it is so musical what
It's-
you do.
Yeah.
wow,
So just for
so
my...
I like that.
Yeah.
You're singing, girl.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Get some cymbals between my knees and stuff like that.
one-woman band.
But you're painting.
One-woman band.
You're painting too the whole time with your story and with your movements. You're like, it's just. I was like because it was the cadence, it was the music, it was the poetry and the visual, and I was like, we'll combust at any moment. Yeah,
Wow.
that's how I felt.
Well, we were just alluding to the relationship between being a drummer and then writing poetry, and Julie, you are a visual artist as well as a musician, but this is a final question for everyone, just in any way that we haven't already spoken about. How is what you do enriched by experiencing or working with another creative or artistic medium?
Come on now.
Should we start?
Yeah, you guys.
How is it enriched? Answer carefully.
That's good. Well, no, I must say I have found it helpful to have a writing partner, and somebody that can say, this really isn't your best work. That's very valuable.
Painful too.
But someone to throw ideas back and forth with. That's my answer.
Co-writing in a very non-Nashville way.
Yeah, it's just, we've just done it for so long. It's just the way we function, you know. But I think, one thing we've been looking forward to is writing with some other folks, and that's another reason why we're here this week.
We're going to try to write a song with Mary later today.
Try really hard. Gonna try to write something with Julie. It's just, yeah, I think you get to a point where you have an idea and you think it's good enough, but you're just not sure where it's going, and it's so fun to see what someone else is hearing and thinking.
I need Mary to take it deep.
Yeah.
Go deep. We're going to throw a long one with this one.
Linford's tired of whispering. He wants somebody to shout.
There you go.
And I think,
We'll whisper deep.
okay.
Whispering deep. Just careful with that X. I feel like I'm excited for the first time in a long time about writing with other people. And I see how much they pull out the dark side of me. And I need that to happen more. And like, tomorrow night we're going to be, here's a little plug, we're playing at the station tomorrow night with this band that I'm in, Old Black Kettle. And I'm doing 2 songs that I co-wrote with other people. And one was a total love glove kind of song, very comfort. The other one's like double murder ballad. And right next to each other we were doing this gospel song and this murder ballad, and Lex, who's the mandolin player in the band, goes, "There you go, Julie, the gospel and death." And I was like, yeah, right there. So I don't know, I think I'm excited about the influence of constantly of these new people that are, the people that have been there a long time, that are always influencing, and then these new people coming in going, I give you permission. So.
I feel like I already can answer this.
All right. Thank all of you for being a part of this panel today.
Do the audience have any questions?
Yeah.
Mm.
You guys?
I'm going to ask you to express your gratitude one more time. But before I do, I want to call out a name of a friend who we all share in common who's in trouble today. And that's our friend Buddy Miller, who had a heart attack after a performance last night in Washington, D.C. And we just really want to say that our hearts and minds are with him. And I say this as a prayer, and ask you to keep Buddy.
Buddy Miller.
Yeah. And so he's at Johns Hopkins Hospital. He's in good hands, but it's our hope that he didn't sustain too much damage before they got him to the hospital. We hope and pray that he returns in all his creative force to our community.
Yeah.
So keep Buddy in your thoughts. I'd like to say thank you to Craig Amison from the Flannery O'Connor and Illusion Foundation for making the drive out from Minton. And for these people, for Minton and Julie and Mary and Linford and Karin, and to our moderator, Julie Height, who did a fantastic job, to you all for your generosity of talent and time and goodwill and thoughtfulness today.